it's your friendly neighborhood Elder Holley. Just wanted to share a few thoughts I've had in this encouraging, inspiring, uplifting, healing Holy Convocation, full of prayer, mutual consolation, and praise, and just testimonies of God's goodness to the house of Israel. Giving thanks to God and recognition to my leader, Chief Rabbi Philip Eugene McNeil, Grandfather Abraham. I want to acknowledge my assistants as the local pastor, my assistant, Sister Elder Alexis Strong, to all the saints of Chicago and believers in God everywhere, friends, family, shalom. I want to talk on a message that came to me after so many days of the Holy Convocation. Us getting up for prayer and hearing testimonies from throughout the United States, Africa, I should say South Africa, and Jamaica. I'm really moved to give us a word. And it's inspired from something Saint Adina said, which was that we celebrate the light, but we also want to master our darkness. And this sermon is called Start. Start in the dark. And I want to share 2 Kings chapter 25, 2 Kings chapter 5 and 20, using my father's Bible here. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, and the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and they built forts against it round about. And the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. And on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine prevailed in the city, and there was no bread for the people of the land. And the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled by night by the way of the gate between two walls, which is by the king's garden. Now the Chaldees were against the city round about, and the king went the way toward the plain. My emphasis is on that 4th verse. I read verses 1 through 4, but in that 4th verse you see it says, and the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled by night. The siege happened in stages. The siege of Jerusalem that we recognize with Zechariah chapter 8 and with this fast of the 10th month. The story ends well, but it starts in the dark. And we have stages beginning with the Babylonians setting up ambushments at the gates, dictating who could come in and who could go out and what could be taken in and what could be taken out. What I want us to see is that God's movement in your life, the Lord's transformation in you. Dare I say that the divine order of your redemption starts in the dark. This format is not new. It was in place before the creation of mankind. If we go to Genesis, you look at Genesis chapter 1. It says in here, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. So we see there that before there was light, before God even said, I see the light, there was darkness. See, this message is for anyone who has never been in a dark place in their life. See, the how I got over testimony givers already lived this. But once you've gone into darkness in your life for the first time, it's a new, strange, scary place. And so I'm saying to people who haven't been there yet, and maybe haven't been there in a way that you may find yourself in the days and years to come, this message should help you, that it starts in the dark. So this brings me to the night watch. Why we get up in the morning, early in the morning while it's still dark, while the earth is sleeping. And speaking of watching and praying, while the world is resting, we're speaking to God when we get up in the night watch. Matthew chapter 24 and 25 speak about the watch and how no man knoweth the hour when the Son of Man cometh. So we should always condition ourselves to be ready for when a message comes or when a change needs to happen in our life by God's command. And think about how in 1892, I want to tell you this, in 1892, a man named William Saunders Crowdy, who went on to be known and is Prophet William S. Crowdy, fell into a deep sleep. And in that dark, Daniel, he had his night vision. And in this deep sleep, Prophet William Saunders Crowdy had his vision of the church of God and saints of Christ. See, you are no different. You have darkness in your life that leads to brighter days. But you have to start in the dark. Job chapter 30, verses 26 and 28, or Job chapter 30, verse 6 and 20 and 8 and 20. See, in there, Job was brought out of this darkness with more than he had before. But we see in this passage the darkness that Job spoke of. Let me give you a little bit of it. Job chapter 30, verses 6 and 20 through 8 and 20. When I looked for good, then evil came unto me. And when I waited for light, there came darkness. My bowels boiled and rested not. The days of affliction prevented me. I went mourning without the sun. I stood up and I cried in the congregation. But Job went through this. His transformation, his new relationship of knowing God's power started with him going to a very dark place. See, people who live in the light may be in the light, but don't see the light. They have good families. You may have good health. You may be that person with a good job. You may be in a good school, have a good pastor, have a good congregation, have good friends in your life. But that doesn't mean that you see the light just because you are living in the light. But when you started in the dark, when you have started in a dark place, some people came up on that rough side of the mountain. Some people lived a struggle for many years. Some people may have had more than the 40 years that we see in Scripture of longing, or the 70 years we see in Scripture of longing. When you've started in the dark and God brings you out, not only are you in the light, but you see the light. See, we're fasting to afflict our bodies for a higher spiritual need. When we fast, we're remembering what it is like to go without, but believing that soon there'll be a feast. We fast commemorating the time of despair for our forefathers, a dark time that started in the dark, but had them at a higher place when they returned to the sacred place in Jerusalem. Now, when we are back in our houses of worship, back in our tabernacles, back in the temple, when we are able to see the light, not just be in the light again. We also want to see that the man of God, Chief Rabbi Philip E. McNeil, Grandfather Abraham, is not only in the house of God, but he is the house for the spirit of prophecy. When we are in the temple and see that your brothers and sisters are the temples of God, now we're doing something. Now we're seeing the light, and we understand that it started in the dark of this COVID-19 stay at home pandemic. It started with the whirlwinds that have gone on in our lives. It started with some of the struggles that we are going through, started with some of the disappointments, some of the losses that we have dealt with in the past couple of years. And now when we're able to be in the light after what started in the dark, we will see the light. House of Israel, pray for me as I pray for you.